sessions. A little bit about myself. I'm very familiar with this work and excited about this conversation regarding high school age programming for our young people. I was with the Sacramento City Unified School District for many years as a coordinator of our expanded learning programs, and have also run programs in organizations and in the New York City public schools. So I'm excited here to have these conversations with three wonderful professionals who will be talking about a very, very diverse set of programming for our high school age. The Partnership for Children and Youth has been invested in summer learning and statewide efforts to increase access for many years because we believe our ability to provide high quality, engaging summer experiences to young people is a core piece of the puzzle when it comes to achieving equity in our system. We're all aware of the many challenges to planning and operating summer programs this year, including staff burnout and navigating COVID protocols. But there's also never been a greater need and opportunity to provide young people safe and welcoming learning spaces with the 4.6 billion in state funding, plus the billions more in federal funding, and the resilience we have seen across all stakeholders in our education system. Now, please note today that our webinar is going to run till about 11:15 a.m. because we're excited about the three speakers that we have, and we wanted to make sure that we have enough time to learn about each program and have time for that Q&A. What's unique about our panel today is that they all provide and oversee a range of high school-based programs, both in the summer and during the school year, but from a variety of approaches, all of which include some type of paid positions, including district-wide work-based learning, a district mentoring program, a community-based after-school provider that works across many districts and program offerings, and also a city-run youth employment program. We are trying to model that in this unique moment of need and opportunity, LEAs and school leaders will have to, one, think more expansively about how they define expanded learning for high school students. Number two, we need to consider building a bigger tent to partner with regional and community partners to meet all of the student needs and demands. And number three, we need to meet students where they are, including incentivizing student engagement with stipends and other assets, and providing more intentional social, emotional learning and mental health supports. Our goal is to spend 95% of our discussion hearing from our practitioners, but before we jump into the panel, I want to provide you with some background and context. And I know you've been seeing some of the slides advancing, but I want to give some highlight as to why these summer learning opportunities are so important. Let's understand this. Like, the first why is here, right? We recognize that most districts think of summer programs and high school youth funding on focusing on credit recovery, right? And we know that it is important to make sure that our young people are on track to graduate. But we also know that repeating the same class that they just had either in the spring or the fall semester, if it didn't go well then, chances are it's not going to go well in the summer in its same form and context. So we want to be more flexible in our thinking about how we can use these dollars to engage our young people. And here are some statistics. The stakes are extremely high here because we know that research has shown that in the wake of school closures, following natural disasters, more students never return to school, including an additional 2% to 9% of the high school students who drop out as a result of the pandemic and associated school closures. Another analysis predicted that between 10 to 25% of students in the most marginalized populations have completely, hear what I said, have completely missed out on learning during the year of pandemic, right? And based on this estimate, that comes out to about 200 to 500,000 California students who may have dropped out of the educational system. Another thing that I want us to think about is that our high school students are feeling more burnt out. There was a significant difference in how elementary and secondary students reported feeling energized during this time. 71% of our elementary students said that often or very often that they felt energized, in comparison to the secondary students at a rate of only 45%. Another thing that we found in our research is that non-classroom issues are also the biggest barriers to learning. 46% of students reported feeling depressed, stressed, or anxious, the single most frequently cited obstacle in fall 2020, while 44% reported distractions at home and family responsibilities. Now, we can all, even as adults, this resonates with us because many of us in our jobs and our careers have felt this same burnout and have experienced these same distractions. So it's not far off for us to understand that. The other thing is noting that student-adult relationships are declining. During spring 2020, interpersonal supports from teachers was a bright spot, with 43% of students reporting that many or all of their teachers made an effort to understand their lives outside of school. Now, compared to only 26% before the pandemic. So that was a great trending, going an upwards trend, right? In the fall 2020, the proportion of students responding positively fell back down to 30%. So there was this decline. When feeling upset, stressed, or having problems, only 41%, right, of these students said there is an adult from their school who they can talk to about it. And that's a decrease from that 46% pre-pandemic. So we understand that, again, those barriers that we're talking about are exacerbated by the feeling that students do not have this connection with these adults that they feel that they can go to and talk to, or who may even care. Now, there's nothing stopping schools from implementing creative solutions at the scale that they've always wished for, with the funding, because the state has allocated $4.6 billion, right, in flexible funding to address learning recovery and to meet social emotional needs that has to be spent by the end of next summer. Now, typically high schools are very limited in their funds for stipends, or little to no money for high school expanded learning, with the assets typical budget, which is about 60 million or less for the entire state. Now, here's an exclusive. You've heard it here, y'all. We have already confirmed with the CDE that this funding can be used on student stipends as long as the program is connected to broader learning, skill development goals, it increases attendance and engagement, and it serves the target population. That's awesome. Once again, giving opportunity for flexibility in the type of engaging and relevant program provided to our young people. Now let's think about what we're going to experience over this next hour or so together. During the course of the discussion, we will explore a range of learning and work opportunities for high school students, how we can embed youth voice and choice, leadership and mentorship into programming, getting insight about the planning and infrastructure needed to implement and support youth, employers, and staff, and also connect the experience to year-round and long-term college and career goals. Just a quick reminder that this webinar is part of a series, and we have a few topics lined up, but at the end, we're going to ask you a few questions about what content areas you'd like to see covered in this series. So please stick around until the end of the webinar so that we can get your feedback. And one last note, we will do Q&A after each speaker presentation versus having to wait until the end of the program. So please send your questions in the chat. The chat will be monitored, right, throughout the program, and speakers will be around for the full webinar. And we can also answer questions in the chat after they speak. So without further ado, let's jump into introducing our first speaker, Mr. Greg Cluster. Okay, so Greg went to a large urban public high school in the 90s, but learned a lot more at his summer job on a small carpentry crew while living in Havana, Cuba for a year than he did in his classes. These experiences grounded his work as a founding teacher an administrator at Met West, an internship-based alternative school in Oakland Unified School District. Currently, he supports all Oakland schools to build internship programs into their structures and manages a district-wide summer work-based learning program serving 500 students across OUSD. He strives to help high schools provide a diversity of experiences that is as broad as the needs and interests of our students. We'd like to welcome Greg Cluster.
Welcome, everybody. Nice to meet everybody. So again, I currently occupy a role as a district-wide leader. And so a lot of what I'm going to be presenting today comes from my experience managing a district-wide program in a big city with lots of schools. But I do just want to say before diving in that most of my career was spent at the site level at a school. And so I know a lot of folks on the call right now are school site leaders, and I'm happy in Q&A to come at this more from my experience at the school level. I also just want to give a shout out to everybody from the community-based organizations on the call. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about partnerships with them, except for this key point that I think is really important to note, which is that when we pay students, it all goes through a local community-based organization that has the kind of nimbleness and ability to pay students much more with a lot less kind of logistical barriers and figure out a way to pay undocumented students. And so I think every organization, especially when it comes to paid experiences, are gonna play an important role because districts are gonna have a hard time getting students into young people's hands. So I just wanna note that before I dive in. And here I go. So Oakland, OUSD's approach to summer work-based learning, we've been doing something called the Exploring College and Career Options program for about 10 years, but we've been growing it year by year. And so a lot of what I'll present is based on what we did in summer 2020 when we pivoted fast to a distance context, but not entirely. So I'm going to start with the numbers. So this was last summer. We had 276 students in internships. 94 of those were in person because we had kind of a limited economic reopening. And so a bunch of our students were working in summer camps, masked and distanced, as well as a bunch of students who also were in kind of skilled trades apprenticeship programs with a local skilled trades prep program called Cypress Mandela. So, but we had lots of virtual internships, including one that you see here with a local like reading development program called Community Reading Buddies. We had 163 students in what I'm saying is Peralta CTE program. So sorry, that's Oakland speak, but Peralta colleges, that's our local community college district. And so we rapidly last spring used our relationship with the Peralta local community college district to develop virtual career tech ed programs for our students and enrolled lots of students in those programs and paid students to do those programs. And all that fell under our ECHO program umbrella. And then we began experimenting with including students who already had jobs, they were working, but they weren't getting any kind of social emotional support from an educator or guidance on how to be successful and safe in the workplace and how to use that job to further their career development. And so we kind of dabbled in having students in our program who already had jobs, but incentivizing them to connect those jobs back to their high school learning through workforce education experience is kind of a typical name for that. But all of that fell under this one structure with about 12 schools involved. And the key things that everything had in common was that the way we staffed it and structured it was that in the spring, we had site-based, so school level work-based learning liaisons, and the central coordinator, that was myself, and a couple other folks in the central office, all working together to help students review a large list of opportunities that we cultivated from around the city. Pausing just a second. So there was a whole tremendous amount of work on recruitment and supporting students to apply for specific opportunities or to register in those community college classes in the spring. And then in the summer, we hired 22 teachers as advisors. and those teachers led weekly seminars, and they did weekly one-on-one Zoom meetings or phone calls with each student in their cohort, as well as visiting internship sites historically. In this case, they did virtual kind of drop-ins on how students were doing in their virtual internships, or they also would drop in on students in their community college classes and just observe, like, how is each student engaging in this class, and then be able to coach them to be more successful. And I can talk more about what's in the weekly seminars in Q&A if necessary. But the key thing was we made sure that each student had an adult that was serving in a kind of a case management role, where they are understanding the larger context of their lives. And then what we did our best to make sure that each student was actually placed in a cohort with a teacher that they had a prior relationship with, and that's been essential. So all of our high schools, some of our high schools are small schools where every adult knows every student to some degree, and then in Oakland we've been engaged in a high school reform effort for the last 7 years or so, where we're breaking up the large high schools into smaller career-focused academies, and we try and build these cohorts where we hire a teacher from each career academy to work with students from that academy in the summer. So moving to the next slide. This is our basic calendar that we're looking at for the coming summer. So we're looking at a 6-week program where that's more or less aligned to our local community college district summer calendar. So we have weekly seminars on Mondays, and then we encourage most internships to try and begin on June 14th, which is 2 weeks after the end of the school year. The week before the 14th, we run like a 3-day kind of student boot camp to get them ready to start their internships or their community college classes. So the work for teachers that we hire is actually a 7-week deal. And then we're ending with a demonstration of mastery on July 23rd. So we're kind of grounding all these seminars that are happening in students preparing to present about their learning from their internship or their job or their community college class in a formal presentation of learning on July 23rd. Historically, that was like a huge kind of gala event in a really big warehouse space in person with 400 kids on with laptops on cocktail tables and presenting local city officials and everybody to come. And it was this beautiful thing. Instead, we're going to figure out how to do it on Zoom somehow, probably. Moving forward. Next slide. So just sort of a little bit more about what is the ECHO teacher role. So it's an adult who knows students well, who really can serve, obviously, as a social emotional support to students, but they also are supporting any local business that decides to host an intern. They can help that business with project planning. So how do you come up with a project that's going to work for the student that benefits your organization, but also helps the student learn? They can engage around student intervention strategy. So if there's a student that's struggling in the internship, either they're coming late or they're not asking a lot of questions, they seem bored, they're messing stuff up, whatever it may be, like that adult can work with whoever is hosting the intern to improve their performance. And then the adult, that teacher works with me around stipend processing. So we make it easy for internship sites to pay students. So if many of our internship sites do contribute money, but they don't have to bring the student onto their payroll, they can make a tax deductible donation to our program, and then we pay the kids. And then we can also help with relaying information. Next slide. Yeah, so I've mentioned that we do a lot of work around supporting recruitment for internships. And so I've kind of mentioned a lot of these things so far, and I definitely want to leave time for Q&A. So I'll just say that the way we publicize opportunity, just skipping to number 3 on this slide, is we have a big spreadsheet that lists all the opportunities where students can earn stipends in the summer. It's a spreadsheet, but it's visible to students across the district. And then we also are running weekly virtual internship options fairs. So we did our first before spring break, and then every Wednesday moving forward, we'll be having opportunities where internship hosts and community colleges can present what they're going to be offering, and students can come and sign on and see what they like. And then I'm working really hard with staff at the schools to make sure that they have a strategy to ensure equitable access to these opportunities. So making sure that it's not just throwing it out there at their schools in Google Classroom and saying, hey, everybody, come take these opportunities, but rather making sure that we don't have all the same kids that always take every opportunity engaged. Instead, I'm encouraging schools to work with their case managers and coordination of services team to identify kids whose lives would really be changed by these experiences and providing the necessary support so that those students apply. And next slide. Great. So just I'll lay out the money stuff, since we need to be thinking in terms of like, how do we use large amounts of money quickly? So this is from last summer. We paid out about $350,000 in student stipends. Students earned closer to $420,000 because many of our internship sites did provide the funds themselves. But this is what the district spent. Then staffing costs, we paid about $880,000 for case management. So those are those teachers hired on in the summer on extended contracts. And then if I think about, portion of my salary and other central office staff that supported approximately $100,000 there. And then we actually invested some money in paying certain teachers from career academies to actually lead their own internship experiences. And we paid about $20,000 for that. We pulled money from local public money. So there's a couple of citywide measures that help fund it, state and federal monies. California folks know about CTIG, Strong Workforce Program, and then national dollars is Perkins. But of course, there's a lot more of this coming this year. A little bit of private foundation money, and then some of the internship providers kicked in for stipends. And I think that's it. I look forward to hearing some questions because I don't know who I'm speaking with, and I'm sure I can dive in deeper to the right things for each of you based on your questions.
Hey, Greg, we want to thank you so much for that amazing overview. And we do have a few questions here. First of all, I just kind of want to start. I was very much intrigued on the second to last slide where you talked about the equity and ensuring that the access to these various internship opportunities. Can you dig just a little bit deeper into how that is in policy and then in practice, how that happens so that students who are historically maybe most disengaged are engaged in the process and know about these opportunities?
Right. Okay, so one thing is, this is Oakland Unified School District, and I was about to say for better or worse, but for worse, it's we basically, most of our high schools are almost entirely serving students who qualify for free and reduced lunch. And there are virtually no white students that attend any school in OUSD except for 2 high schools. And so there's this way that, so you can still cut up students who qualify for free and reduced lunch. There's always going to be, a subset that go after opportunities and a subset that feel like, no, I'm not going to be welcomed into those spaces. I'm not interested in that. I probably don't know enough to go after this. So for all kind of reasons or just logistical reasons, people don't go after opportunities. And so there's really kind of 2 strategies. So I think the key thing in almost all these high schools is just, do we have adults that are in close relationship with kids aware of these opportunities? They're the ones that have the prior relationship with the students that might be not showing up all the time, not popping up on the Zoom classes, not going after opportunities. So we really try and make sure that we want teachers involved with the recruitment efforts, and that's important. We want these presented in classes, but we also want these opportunities to be in the hands of our case managers. We also have positions called work-based learning liaisons. We have positions called community school managers. Some schools have student support specialists. So there's this diversity of roles at all the schools, but I've really tried to make sure that the folks who are tasked with being in close relationship with students on the margins know about these opportunities. So I've been able to I've been hosting weekly Zoom calls that are wide open to all these folks where I just talk through hey, there's this opportunity, there's this. Let me give a little, you've got a spreadsheet in front of you, but let me give you a little color commentary on what each of these opportunities are. So there's that. But there's also a little bit of kind of structural pushing. So like I said, there's a couple schools that do have larger percentages of students who are middle or upper class, larger percentages of white students. And those two schools, honestly, historically, there's been an issue where they really have had the students who maybe already have more resources and more privilege are getting these opportunities. And the schools have been kind of like, hey, you know, I hit my numbers, we got a lot of kids in the program, I'm good, you know, and that's not good. And that's not okay with me in terms of how we're investing our money. So I've been able to use data. We've got a work-based learning dashboard that really shows who's been participating. We can cut it up by gender, race, and we can cut it up by qualification for free and reduced lunch. So I've actually gone in this January, I put this data in front of key leaders at those high schools and said, this was your data last summer. I'm not okay with this. You know, to just say it as the leader of the program from the central, I'm not okay with this data. Okay, so what are you going to do? And the truth is that everybody there does care about it. They're not okay with it either, but if they don't take a strategic approach, then it's not going to change.
Well, I appreciate that, Greg. And I know that we could continue that conversation. It's an important conversation. Just really quickly, I want to remind the audience that all of our speakers will be on the webinar until the end. So please continue. If you have questions, put those in the chat and Greg will either be able to respond, or if we have some time at the end, we'll bring it back. One quick question from the audience is, how much planning went into this before the actual launch?
Well, I mean, I don't want to be disheartening because I know a lot of people are starting programs from scratch with new money right now, but this is a program that the district has been operating for close to 10 years. And so, and every previous year's experience is part of the planning process for the next year. I mean, we've been building and refining and developing a reputation for the program, building relationships with internship host sites for years. So, but I'm imagining maybe in this sort of general discussion.
What would your advice be for newer programs? Speaking to those newer programs, where would they start?
Yeah, I mean, I really think it's important to first identify to start at the student level. Like, okay, who are the students we're talking about here that we really want to engage in some kind of summer paid work-based learning experience? Who are they? What schools do they go to? What is their situation? How are they spending their time right now? Then who is in relationship with those students? Mm-hmm. And get those people in a room to say, what are the experiences that maybe I as a school leader or a community-based organization or a district leader, what are the kinds of experiences that would engage this student and would get them re-engaged in school or change their perspective about what they're trying to do with their lives? That's how I would build it and say, okay, so we got kids, they're all interested in this thing. They're interested in that thing. Okay, then let me take that. I know it's fast, but I think it could happen. If you knew, it's like, all right, all these case managers said what our kids really need right now is they need to be in physical workplaces doing work that could lead to long-term employment. Okay, fine. Then let me go after I could go after particular retail businesses, or I could go after, I mean, there's a lot to think about, but based on what they say, again, I think the starting place is pick your student body, figure out who's in close relationship with them, talk to those adults and say, what do these students need to do this summer to get them back on track? And then what are the incentives needed? Then you'll know how much we need to pay these kids and what community partners or what businesses do we need to go out to and say, we need you this summer and we've got money. So how do you do what we know our students need?
Awesome. Greg, I want to thank you so much. And I know our audience thanks you. And again, please keep those questions coming. We definitely want to now transition to our next presenter, Mr. Darren Person. Darren has worked as a mentor manager for Fresno Unified School District for approximately 13 years and has been instrumental in establishing more than 20 new mentoring programs that connect thousands of students with positive role models every year. In his current role, Mr. Person, has also led the development and implementation of the Alliance programs, both Men and Women Alliance, aimed to help students develop leadership skills and increase coping skills to manage negative behaviors that lead to suspension and expulsion. Mr. Person is also the co-founder of person-to-person counseling services with his wife, Iris, that provides counseling services to individuals and families, and is also, if that wasn't enough, He is also an adjunct professor at Fresno State University and Fresno Pacific University. We would like to welcome Mr. Darren Person.
Thank you, Moreau. I got a little even tired as I heard you mention all that on today. And thank you for the invite for me to get the opportunity to mention some of the exciting work that we're doing here with Fresno Unified School District. I appreciate any opportunity we have to share on these moments. Again, my name is Darren Person. I oversee the mentoring program for Fresno Unified that encompasses our mentoring programs I'm going to talk about today, and also an elective course that I also helped created 13 years ago with Fresno Unified School District. Many of you know the power of mentoring and how significant it is for the growth, not only socially and emotionally, but in terms of academically for our students. Our signature comment is not aware to many of you, but it comes from Dr. James Comer, which mentions no significant learning occurs without a significant relationship. So in building our mentoring programs, we've come from that perspective and making sure that our students have those relationships, even if it's through a peer or through an adult that can help model positive behavior. We can go on to the next slide. Our mission is quite simple, right? And it's always been that we can find more quality mentors through the district. I'll go over in a few minutes about our data and how we've grown. But to be honest, without our partnerships that we've created, without some of the innovative programs that I'm going to talk about, we would not have been able to increase the mentoring across our district. Next slide. This is just a fancy way of me kind of showing our infrastructure. When I first sat down 13 years ago to look at where we were and how we were going to make this possible, I thought it was important that first we develop some type of infrastructure. And we started recruiting mentors, but we didn't really have the internal workings, the infrastructure to be able to handle the load of mentors and to begin to navigate them back to the school sites. As I listen to, especially the content of today, I think it's important to note that we've been able to do that by increasing not only my program, I actually oversee 7 staff members, but then we also contract with various individuals at our school site, which encompasses around about 50 in terms of teachers, counselors that work on our behalf for our mentoring programs at those school sites. And that really has allowed us to be able to grow through that without really building or having such a insurmountable in terms of administrative load, in terms of costs, in terms of adding just staff members. So our partnerships that are happening internally and actually externally, that really has allowed us to grow in our school district. Next slide, thanks. I'm always, whenever I get the opportunity to kind of show our growth, I love to do it because it really showed where we were. When we first came, we had about 255 students that were engaged in mentoring. As of 2019, we had approximately 4,000. We continue to grow every year through our mentoring. And again, I'll be able to talk about some of those things. Next slide. Okay, let me just mention real briefly within Fresno Unified School District. When we first started, we only had one-on-one mentoring where we would take community people and connect them to our students. Again, we felt there was a need to be able to grow. Fresno, just like probably some of the communities that you are part of, have tremendous people that want to support and help. There's also tremendous CBOs that want to be able to help. What we did was initially reached out to our CBOs, help build capacity with them, but then also start looking at what are other ways that we can connect our students to mentors. One of the ones we have a one-on-one program. We also have group mentoring, and you'll see that some of the icons there are Girl Power and Young Men of Character, which happens after school or during lunch. We also have a new approach with e-mentoring that we actually are collaborating currently with I Could Be, where we are able to connect students online to other mentors. Our community-based approach is, again, we contract with several community groups, as well as we do some volunteering. They're also volunteer-based, not just all paid, but they work within our district and we connect them to students. The program that I'm going to talk about today, really I'm going to highlight, is our peer mentoring program. But we also do MBK success mentoring, where we take this approach is where we actually utilize our internal forces, which is our teachers and other staff individuals on campus, and they also do mentoring. So there's really a combination of utilizing volunteers, utilizing paid resources, and also utilizing our internal staff members to do this mentoring. So when I get the question a lot about how did you grow, I think it was those three approaches that really has helped us to grow. So we won't depend on just having a budget to be able to do it. And with that, creating that environment has really helped us to be at the place that we are. I want to just briefly talk about what we're doing in terms of our peer mentoring program. So if you could actually bring that slide, thank you so much. Peer mentoring, what I've discovered as we continue to look at, we finally got to a limit where I felt that we've maximized our adult recruiting. I know there's a lot more that we can do in terms of recruiting community members, but we start turning that dial more towards our students. And then if you look at the research, we see that peer mentors are just as effective in many cases as our adult mentors. So we about 5 years ago began to build our peer mentoring program. So what we do, we take high school students and within the same region, we train them, and then we prepare them to be mentors to a middle school student that's also in a nearby region. I want to emphasize that these are paid students. They become what we call student employees through Fresno Unified School District. They work about 2 hours a week in our district and connecting with another student. I said we have 450 students, but now we have grown past that number. We had 23 school sites. The sessions, typically when we are in person, look at their meetup at either the cafeteria or classroom, sit across from another student, and we work them through some curriculum that we have set through other engagement activities where they work for about an hour and a half or so with another middle school student and stay connected with them through the entire school year. Not only that, they also are engaged in service learning projects where they work at various places throughout our county, whether it be like a neighborhood park, or they take the mentor and mentee also work together during that process. Our recruitment happens internally. Again, as I mentioned earlier when I started our conversation, is that we actually pay either teachers or counselors through a supplemental contract who help us recruit the students at the high school level to be the mentor and also at the middle school level to be the mentee. Obviously, our recruitment is a lot easier at the high school level where you're paying students. And we are looking for those students that are in good standing academically, as well as behaviorally in terms of their attendance. But on the middle school level, obviously we utilize incentives for our students and also encourage them that we think this would be a good thing. But the incentives and the outstanding snacks obviously makes a difference. We train on both parts. We train the mentor, the high school student, and the mentee. On the right-hand side, I did want to mention some of our internal partners that have worked really well for us. We partner with our local university here in Fresno State University, as well as Fresno Pacific. Internally, we have our own, what we call as our Project Access, which it leads the way in terms of providing services to our foster care and homeless students, our English learners, our African American program here in our district, as well as some other internal sources that have helped us make that connection. Last night. Lastly, the different groups or target populations that we have focused on with our peer mentoring includes those that are involved in athletics, our English learners, which I would say right now is in terms of our most expanded program. This includes our newcomers, those that newly arrived to the States that don't speak much English. We work with them, match them with another student that's been redesignated already, and they are also in a mentoring relationship. We also work with, again, I mentioned Project Access. We have target population groups consisting of our Southeast Asian. We have a peer mentoring group that's happened with those students, as well as our African American students. What we found is, I mean, that old adage, if you build it, they will come. We've found that many of, in terms of our departments, knowing that we have a peer mentoring model, are now saying we want more students to be connected to our middle school students. And we also did a hybrid version of that, now connecting our 12th grade students with some of our incoming ninth graders to help them navigate as they come through high school. So again, there's been a lot of great things happening within our district, and I would love to share even more if there's any questions about what we're doing here through Fresno Unified School District. Thank you, Maria.
Darren, we'd like to thank you for that presentation and an overview of such a robust mentoring program there in Fresno. I have a couple questions. I just wanted to, you had mentioned about the high school students becoming mentors in that peer mentoring program to the middle school students, that they become employees through Fresno Unified. How do you, and then also specifically speaking to your newcomers program, how do you navigate undocumented students who, because this is a paid, and you said they go through Fresno, do you use community partners to be able to allow individuals to still also be compensated for that? How do you navigate that?
You're asking me for my secrets. For sure, Monroe. Yeah, we do have yeah, that's a great question. We came across that, especially as through our English learners program. We have several students in terms that are also considered undocumented. We have a partner here, a foundation here in Fresno, that actually reached out to us about their services, wanting to be able to be our go in between. So we have a contract with them that then works with our documented students to allow them to be paid. So we pay the funds through them, which they were able to get to the students.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And then could you speak a little bit more about the newcomer program, because it is unique, and just in general for what services and additional supports that you're able to provide for those students who are newly arriving and who need supports in acclimating into the new environment?
Yeah, a really good question. The first group that we really target was just our English learners. Then we have our own English learners department that said, Darren, we have another group of students that we call newcomers that need really, intensive support. So what we've been able to do is actually take students that are now redesignated, that had a similar experience as our newcomers, and match them with the student. The beauty, I think, of the program is the facilitator or the teacher that is typically teaching our newcomers has now become a facilitator at the mentoring sessions. So at a session, what you would typically see, you would see the facilitator, you see the group of mentors, the group of mentees all gathered together. And now they're able to practice some of the skills that they've been learning in terms of English, but now it's less intimidating. So it's not just the teacher teaching them. It's actually now a student that becomes more than just a teacher. Now they're a friend on campus, because a lot of these students don't even have those connections at a school campus. So I think it's dual. Now the beauty of it, I was able to walk through last year and be able to see, and it's either board games or they have some exercises that they do together. They actually are now our friends, and it just takes the load off the student to be able to learn.
What's been the impact that you've seen with obviously the distance learning and not being in person, as far as the impact on the mentor program? How have you had to adapt it? And what's been the outcome in regards to
Yeah,
that?
that was, it was very difficult for us, just like many of your organizations. Around March, we had to make a decision what we would go from here. And we really valued, and our district valued, what mentoring was. So we use just like Zoom, we use Microsoft Teams. We use that platform across our district. So what we did was take the relationships that were occurring and just continue that, and now become online. So we took the same facilitator, students, and now they're matched, but it's actually obviously through distant learning and through the virtual platform that we use. it's very tough. We don't have the numbers that we had before. And actually, in terms of attendance, that was a struggle, especially some of our programs. I know I mentioned a lot about our peer mentoring programs with our high school students, but we have some programs that have, younger students. And it's been a challenge to get them online to be able to participate. But I would say, Monroe, that we've seen just recently, even though we're now through a hybrid model coming back to our schools, but we felt that it has been effective. We do monitor. We have our own monitoring system in terms of how we look at our data, what we look at the impact that we have in terms of mentoring on grades, attendance, as well as behavior. And we have seen improvements across the board. And I think that's why we continue to grow. We're also looking at not only the quantitative piece, but also the qualitative, where we're looking at the impact in terms of socially, emotionally, looking at growth mindset and so forth. And again, we're seeing improvements across the board.
Finally, the last question I have for you is specifically what programs historically have happened in the summer, which ones will happen this summer? And I know you mentioned the hybrid. Will those be hybrid? Will they be all in person? What's your plan around that?
You think another good question. We're in conversations now, as many are, because we're wondering how many will come back. Right now in our district, somewhere about 40% of students are either here on campus. This is actually our first week. Then, but obviously a large part are still online through this model. We know for sure in terms of the summer, our EL newcomer program will continue. We will continue to match. What we do with those students, again, they're paid employees. Now we place them in classrooms, our high school students, with elementary school students, where they begin to work with even those students now, younger groups of students. So we keep them employed that way as well. And we also have, in terms of the work that we do with some of our contracted mentoring, they stay engaged with students that need additional support. So we will continue to match throughout summer school, whether it be through our elementary, middle school, or high school.
Awesome. Darren, I want to thank you so much. And once again, for everybody out there who is viewing this webinar, you can continue to ask questions, anything specific to Darren or any of our other presenters' presentations, and we'll be monitoring that chat. So thank you, and we hope you stick around with us.
I sure will. Thank you.
All right, all right. So now we're on to our third and final presenter for this morning, actually, excuse me. Brad Lepin, he is actually the president and the CEO of ARC, which is an after-school and outdoor education provider in Southern California. He began his career as a social worker in Boston, Massachusetts, and the organization now is with over 75 schools in 18 districts. So Brad is also going to provide with you during his presentation, maybe some more points to his bio. So we are so excited to continue this conversation with Brad. Brad, welcome.
Thank you so much, Monroe, and thank you for having me. Folks, listen, I'd be remiss. I just scanned through the participant list here, and I would be remiss if I didn't shout out the ARC High School Site Coordinators. I don't know how you found this, but I am thrilled that you are here, and I am so appreciative of all you do day in and day out, because you're the social justice warriors out there getting the work done. So I see you out there. Thank you for being here. I want to jump to Q&A as quickly as I possibly can here. I'm very interested in hearing what people are curious about and what's happening in these unbelievably unique times. But for a little bit of context, I'm a former juvenile probation officer turned special education teacher for young people defined as having behavioral and emotional disabilities. I always joke around and say, don't all middle school kids have emotional disabilities? I'm not sure why you're labeling my kids, but that's kind of how I got my start. And then I co-founded ARC back in 2001. Fast forward to today, ARC is a community-based organization, after-school provider, Southern California. We've got 78 school partners right now, serving pre-pandemic about 18,000 students a day. We're at 17 different districts. So we've got rural frontier districts, we've got major urban districts, we've got charter schools, private schools, public schools, big and small. What's exciting about that and helpful with that is we get to see the ways that different places regionally and size-wise and demographics-wise, how they are implementing different unique programs, and we're able to say, hey, these folks are doing it this way, maybe we can bring it to you as well. Some of the names you might recognize as partner schools: LA Unified, San Diego Unified, Sweetwater Unified, Green Dot Public Schools, Intercity Education Foundation, Alliance Public Schools, are just a few of our bigger partners. One of the things that makes us really unique is that about half of our after-school programs are high school after-school programs. I think when people think about after school, they typically think kickball and arts and crafts and some amazing tutoring, which are phenomenal for our littlest young people to support working parents. High school programming is a little bit different than that. We are mastery and club based versus time based. We don't have a set of staff that go in from 3 to 6 Monday through Friday. There's a lot more flexibility. For those that don't know, 50% of the federal funding that California gets goes towards high school programming under the assets grant. So we're unique in that we have I think 30 of our schools are high assets funded programs. And a couple of really quick things about how it's different. One, I talked about the mastery difference. The other way is staffing. So we put a full-time site coordinator on a school campus, and they bring in a team of employees, ARC employees, to lead clubs, but they also bring in vendors. So if there's somebody that's doing really high-end theater in a given community, we can bring that organization in under the umbrella of the assets grant and ARC onto the campus. And I heard Greg mention earlier the idea of nimbleness of the CBOs. One of my mentors used to say semper gumby, and the reality is we can move really quickly with doing some innovative and unique things, including the stipend, but also bringing folks on. Staffing wise, we also have models where we are employing the certificated teachers during the school day to stay on campus after the final bell and do credit recovery, teach classes, do academic intervention, the like. So it's flexible, and there's a lot of different models that are being used. The other piece that I think is unique and different, most high school programs that I know of do this, but we've got leadership councils, students that are trained through a specific leadership curriculum that for us includes outdoor education, that trains these students to run the program. So they are getting some career readiness workshops just by helping us drive the program. They know how much money the school gets for these after school clubs. They know what their peers want for clubs and classes. They know how the resources should be used, and they drive that discussion for us. They're trained, they participate, they have weekly meetings, and the leadership councils are a big piece of what we do. Just as an example, we have an outdoor education division as well. So, we'll take those leadership students and other students rock climbing, and it's less about teaching rock climbing. It's more about teaching goal setting and overcoming fear in your life, really the social emotional learning piece that we use outdoor education as a way to teach. I think the other piece would be traditionally these after school funds were used to create safe spaces for students as a response to crime. Now we see ourselves as a carrot to get students to stay in safe places, but also expand their horizons and drive the mastery. So as an example only, high school students, one of the things we know they want is driver's education, and it's expensive, and they can't necessarily do the behind the wheel training with funding from home. So we say, okay, we'll offer that using these funds, but we're going to start at 40 minutes after the final bell, so that we say to students, we want you to go to a tutoring room. We want you to get your homework done. We want you to get the academic support. And the carrot is that we're going to then get you into driver's ed, and we're going to help you get what you want, which is a driver's license or a job or an internship. So that's another big piece. Another example that we've seen is using the after school funds to be able to employ a staff person whose job it is to go find the paid internships for our students. So I give the credit to Green Dot Public Schools had the idea. We support them in doing this, but they use assets funds to have a person whose significant portion of their job is to find summer paid internships for the students that use the funding, but also use the funding to find and manage and implement, but also to pay the stipends to the students. there's lots of great examples. I guess the last one I would share would be, partnerships. And I heard them referenced before by my esteemed colleagues who just spoke, but partnerships are key. An example of one is we are able to get high school students college credits using assets funding. We had a partnership with Cal State Channel Islands and the California Institute for Social Business. Students were given college credits to do a course that happened at the school campus. So a professor came to the campus, taught social business. Students got credit paid for by the assets grant. The students then had a social business fast pitch competition, and we gave out prize money for seed money for them to start that program. So that's an example, but it's the type of flexibility that and innovation that I think after school allows us to test. We can kind of toss mud at the wall and see what sticks, and then build on it if it works. So I guess the last thing I'd say before turning it over to any questions folks might have is, ARC's unwritten mission is that if it's happening at an elite private school where parents are paying $25,000 or $30,000 a year to send their children, it should be happening at all of our schools. We know it works. They have outdoor education programs. They have career and college counselors at a ratio of 1 to 15, 1 to 20, not 1 to 400. They have robust visual and performing arts programs. They have someone who is assigned to and paid to find internships and externships and apprenticeships for the students. They create those networks. We can do the same. And that's what's been really exciting and fun about the assets grant over the past, decade plus. I have never met a principal that I sit down with and say, would you like to have an outdoor education program? Would you like to have a summer program that's not just about intervention for the students that are struggling most, but really is about strengths-based learning and about job training and about college tours? Do you want that? They always say yes. The issue is I don't have time and I don't have money. Now we've got money. And I think with the right partnerships, we've got the time and the people as well. So it's an exciting time. I guess the last thing I would say is I never expected this, but I started getting phone calls a few weeks ago when AB 86 came out. I started getting phone calls from schools that had applied for high school after school grants and said we weren't eligible because we didn't quite meet the poverty threshold. But we know about that grant and we know what it does. And it checks every one of the boxes for what is required right now or asked of by the AB 86 money. It's really interesting that there is already a solution in the state of California that has been used and proven and tested and tried. And I think we should build on that. So thanks again so much for the time and inviting me to talk. And I'll look forward to any questions that folks might have.
Listen, Brad, we want to thank you, man. It's funny because there were some questions that were being teed up, but as you kept speaking, you were answering the questions. So,
oh, sorry, I wasn't even watching the chat box. I should have been. Sorry about that.
No, it's great. It's just, it's awesome. It speaks to the thoroughness of your presentation. I think let's look in here and just how do you, for individuals out there who are, you mentioned that when you go into a school and a school district and you sit down with the principal and say, hey, I would like to provide all of these enriching and engaging opportunities for your high school students. For those who are met with, I just need credit recovery, or, I just need these type of, prevention programs that may look, very rigid in their style. How would you, what would you advise for other individuals in your position on how to combat that, or how to respond to the type of rigidity that they may be experiencing? Or resistance?
Yeah, amazing question. And boy, could take 10 minutes just to answer that one, but let me try and be as brief as I can, Monroe. So first, I don't think I would ever, or my team would ever go into a school and say, this is what we want to offer. We always frame it as, what have you always wanted to offer that we can help you put in place? Because every school is unique and different. When we get that school, that school leadership that says, we want to use our funding for only academic intervention, There's the short answer is we can use ed code to our advantage. Often we are more educated about the ed code around these funding streams than the school leadership. So you can say, well, you're not allowed to do that. You also have to have some enrichment and some recreation. And so that helps to be able to kind of point at the ed code. And then the second thing is, I believe it's our job to say, yes, we can absolutely focus on academic intervention, but here are some examples that we're seeing around the state that are really working wonderfully to help get students to stay engaged at school. If I can get the student who's struggling in math to stay after school for a martial arts class, and they have a relationship with the site staff, the site coordinator, the program leaders, and that martial arts class starts a half an hour after the final bell, the after school staff have the relationships with the students, and they can get that young person to say, hey, why don't you drop into tutoring to get your math done before class today? So we really try and talk to the school leadership that's pushing for just academics using these funds to say, we'll get you academics, but let's get the students to love coming to school first, and then we can do the academic intervention.
Gotcha. There was a question, does ARC partner with districts where after school is staffed by school employees? Do you find that if you do, is there some challenges in navigating that type of partnership?
It is interesting, the range of what is allowed and not allowed in that area. So we have one of our larger urban school districts that has a definitive contractual rule with the union that we are not allowed to incentivize in any way teachers that are certificated to help with the program delivery. We can't pay the teachers. Other school districts, there's no issue with that. We're able to put them on, so they're getting two paychecks. They get a paycheck from the school to teach algebra, and then in the afternoon, they're getting a paycheck from ARC to either teach cooking, if that's what one of their passions are, or potentially to do algebra tutoring as well. So there is a range, and we really follow the lead of the district. The preferred strategy is to be able to use teachers in combination with the outside vendors and the ARC staff to be able to deliver the most robust and diverse program we can.
Awesome. Well, I'm scanning our chat here to see if there are any other questions. I wanted to give an opportunity if any one of our panelists, we just have a couple of minutes left. Brad, if you want to start, if you just want to leave maybe just 30 seconds of advice to anybody who's out there in regards to, again, our overall theme here is to hope that people can start to expand their minds about the implementation of these funds and the usage of these funds to engage our high school students and to re-engage, let's say, our high school students who have experienced such a lot of loss and tragedy and disconnection during this pandemic. So if there's anything that you, Brad, Darren, Greg, that you want to add to the conversation before we close out, I'd love to hear from you. Brad, we'll start with you if there's anything.
Thanks, Monroe. I guess my closing statement would be, one, thank you to all the educators out there in leadership roles and all the way down to the TAs that have just been doing so much day in and day out and pivoting left and pivoting right to stay there and be there for our students. So thank you to all the educators out there. I hope we never get back to normal. If I hear that statement, I can't wait for us to get back to normal. I'm going to lose my mind. Normal didn't work for too many of our young people. So let's not just get back to normal. Let's get back to better than normal. And, let's not waste a good crisis. We've got an opportunity here with this crisis to make some significant changes and do the things that we've been talking about doing for years. Now is the time. Let's push, let's act. And I'm excited to be a part of a team doing that.
Thank you, Brad, and thank you for all that you and your organization is doing for our young people.
Thank you. Thank you.
Greg, I see you there. What do you have to say to the people?
Well, I guess I'll just sort of piggyback on what Brad said, which is, reaching beyond the nuances of our programs into this like really weird historical moment in terms of how schools have changed in the last year. I think, states have figured out how a structure by which schools can grant credit to students for something other than them being seated in a seat locked in a building. and they've never done this before on a district-wide level, right? That there are these ways of granting attendance credit for students who are getting work done or who are connecting with teachers online. And I just hope that moving forward, folks across the kind of sector can figure out, like, okay, how do we preserve a little bit of the flexibility that's been introduced to how high schools can grant credit to students, or, you know, say that students are enrolled, so that high schools can begin to build programs that actually work for a lot of the students that maybe high schools never did work for all that well before. Like, if you can get a kid, if you can develop a program now with this new money that is keeping some students engaged who maybe never were that engaged before, then maybe there's also an opening for how you can keep that alive and say, well, this counts, right? This kid is getting on the phone with their advisor, you know, every other day, and they're reading books, and yeah, they're not showing up to class because they're actually working 40 hours a week right now. And we can't get them to stop working 40 hours a week. Otherwise they're going to become homeless. But we're going to say, this kid is in school. We're serving this kid, you know? So how do people, I just hope that people give themselves license to fight harder for what they know works for the kids that have been pushed out of high school in the past.
Awesome. Thank you, Greg. We appreciate that. Darren, close us out.
Yes. Monroe, and again, appreciate the opportunity, and other panelist members. It's been great to be sharing the stage with you today. I would say for me, just maybe two things. Number one, obviously I'm in a unique place to be in a district that have totally just encompassed and value what mentoring is doing by having its own like department. I understand that. And so whenever I present across the board, I hear others like, we need that. That might not always be the case for the other districts that are out there, but I do encourage you to be innovative in your approaches. You know, not one size fits all. You know, I think we have to just think out of the box. You know, I was one of those students that, you know, here I am now, when I hear people talk, I was like that student that was failing, in trouble, poor, drugs, neighborhood, everything like that. And really what really rescued me or elevated me was the great teachers that we have, and then the mentors that embraced me. But I passed over so many other teachers and so many mentors. And so I would say us to be innovative in our approaches, and that's what we try to do in Fresno Unified School District, and trying to reach a student. And number two, I would say that for us not to ignore the power of the student body or the student population to help us in this fight, to help us with other students. We've tried to move in that direction in terms of establishing more like peer mentoring, because, you know, adults, we do okay, but I think we could solicit the help of other students to help us in this battle. And sometimes the magic is within that, you know, the secret sauce is within that opportunity. So I would encourage those two things, as well as all the other great things I heard today.
Awesome. Thank you so much. What a great way to wrap us up. I want to thank our esteemed panel, all three of our presenters today. Thank you for your time, your expertise, and your heart, your genuine heart and talent there. I'd like to thank Partnership for Children and Youth. I'd like to thank Collaborative Communications for all of your support today. I want to definitely thank every single participant that is on this webinar or who may see the webinar at a later time. I would like to also remind you all, please take that survey, because we want to hear from you what other topics you would like to hear in the future, and we will do our best to be able to provide that to you. There will be another webinar in the next 2 weeks, so Thursday, April 22nd, and that one will be focused on how to partner with higher education institutions and teacher candidates to staff summer programs. So once again, we want to thank the California Collaborative for Educational Excellence for supporting us to offer this series. And we very much appreciate everyone, please, to fill out that survey. We want to also thank the CCEE Develop Resources and Supports that will be as useful to the field as possible. So hopefully we will see you all in a couple of weeks. Thank you very much. And again, thank you to our panelists. Have a wonderful day.